I think sometimes we think of it as like this big search. That person is out there. I just got to go find them. But it's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And then God will bring that person to us.
And also, for the sake of the audience, we do want to introduce Bryan, as we know him over the years from camp. He comes to speak out there, and he's a pastor in Iowa at the Tabernacle Church. So yeah, as we've been growing up, we've always just known Bryan, and our family has gotten to know you over the years. And today we want to focus on relationships.
But why don't we just start off with how you met your wife, because that's just a great story.
Yeah, it's good. I'll try to tell it the short version. I had always probably since I was like 4 or 5 years old, that God had called me into ministry. I didn't tell anybody that because I didn't really want to do it, and never told anybody. Went to college. My senior year in college, I'd gone to a Promise Keepers event, and at that event, God just like hit me in a way that I'd never been hit before. And I went forward and I said, okay, Lord, I know since for the last 16 years, first time ever, I said, I will do this if you provide me a partner in ministry, like a wife. Because I just seen growing up pastors' wives and how important they were to the team of their ministry. And so that was probably in the fall. I went back for my senior year. And the first week I meet this, we were involved in InterVarsity. And all the seniors would always take a freshman and take them out to what they called chapter camp. And it was out in Rapid City. And I had 2 freshman gals that I gave a ride to. There was one gal in the front seat, another in the back. The girl in the front seat fell asleep, like someone had given her a drug or something. And she just like slept for several hours. Well, there was a girl in the back that I had never met before. And we were just having this great conversation, and just telling me about how much she had loved the church. She grew up and all this stuff. And I asked her what her major was, because she was a freshman. And she said, well, I'm a dietetics major, but to be honest, this probably sounds really weird, but I've always wanted to be married to a pastor.
Wow.
I almost drove off of like Interstate 90 because I was like, I just put the one and only fleece I'd ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I had just like,
laid it out there.
Yeah. And I didn't even know her name. But that weekend, I not only met her and got to know her and her heart, and she was fun and all this stuff. I got to meet her parents. And so I met her parents the same day that I met her.
Oh, wow.
And the next week, we went out on a first date. And we played tennis. And 2 years later, we were married.
That's crazy.
So after that first date, what were your thoughts? Were you pretty much, yes, this is the one? Or did it take a little while?
Yeah, she had such a very different personality than I have. She's more introverted. She's probably more deep than I am. I just like people, and she's just much more calm, and so I just sensed that she had a kind of just the spirit about her that would just be a fun person to be around, but make a good team. And yeah.
Wow. So kind of going forward then, because I know a lot of people kind of struggle with, okay, is this the right person? Is it not? And they kind of get into this area of hesitation versus perfection. What's kind of the balance there for, as you're navigating, is this the right person? Being able to discern, hey, is this like just peace from God, or am I striving for finding a perfect person?
Being too picky.
Yeah. I see that a lot, because you can fall to one extreme or the other. Mm-hmm. Some people are like, they'll take anything and it doesn't matter and it'll all work out, Yeah. And then there's other people that are so perfectionistic. They've got this picture in their mind of the perfect person that really doesn't exist, that inevitably you get in a relationship and you find out, oh, well, that was disappointing, or I wish I didn't know that.
My expectations.
Yeah, that perfect list. So the analogy I like to use with guys, because guys struggle with this too, they're dating. I said, it's like bow hunting. When you're sitting in your stand, you want to shoot the biggest buck possible. But if you wait for the perfect buck, you'll never get one.
True.
At some level, and I think that's a spiritually discerned, right? God just put it on my heart. This is the one. This is the one. Mm-hmm. No, she's not perfect, but neither am I. But together, I think Chuck Swindoll, kind of a famous pastor, said, it's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person. And part of marriage is, especially when people get married younger, it's growing up together, and it's maturing, and and working through some of those difficult things. And that certainly was true for us. We were both young. We really didn't know each other that well. It was stressful that first year or so.
Yeah. Before you met your wife, Rachel, did you have past relationships before that you could compare that to? And what were the differences between the one versus the ones that you had dated?
Yeah, I think I'd had a number of, relationships in the past, but they were maybe more just, the mentality, oh, this is fun, versus this person feels like this could be a good mom to my children. She could be a good life partner in ministry. When you start thinking about the big questions in life, not is this person fun, or is it just, is this person someone that is someone I want to spend the rest of my life with? Yeah. For a Christian, marriage it's the biggest decision you ever make. Mm-hmm. I've bought in cars that, I wish I hadn't done that, or gone to a school. You can always change those. But from a Christian perspective, marriage is for better, for worse, for, until death do us part. And so it is the biggest decision you'll ever make.
And it shapes your whole future. It shapes where you'll live, who's going to be your family, the future of your children, your grandchildren, generations.
Yeah, all of that. That person is going to be the main person who helps you raise these children, which is your legacy. So it is a huge decision.
Yeah.
But if you're waiting for the perfect person, I tell people like this too, they'll say, oh, this is the perfect church. And I said, if you think you found the perfect church, don't join, because you'll ruin it. Mm-hmm. There is no such thing as a perfect church. There's no such thing as a perfect person.
How do you manage some people might feel stressed or anxious about the fact that it is the biggest decision of your life. And even when it comes to dating, there might be a lot of stress surrounding, oh, what if I choose to date the wrong person? How do people kind of mitigate that stress and anxiety around such a large decision like marriage?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you ever want to be in a big hurry on your big decisions, like impulsive decisions where you date somebody for a few weeks or a few months. And that's why you date, right? You get to know people, you get to know their family, you get to know their siblings, and you start to get a sense of, are you comfortable with this? Am I a better person around this person than when I'm not? Yeah. And that's key. I the dating world where you just two people go out for dinner, and the best thing you could ever do is bring that guy home. Let your dad work him over, right? Let your sisters work him over, and just see how they respond to family and discussions, and
get the outside input.
Oh,
sometimes when you're in the middle of it, it's like you're laser focused. You're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. This is awesome. But you don't have the outside voices to say.
Like from your friends.
Whoa, that does not make sense at all.
Yeah. And that's a problem. We're just not always self-aware. We don't always see things that other people see. Mm-hmm. For most of the world, people still have arranged marriages. That's dominant in the world.
I didn't know that.
Wait, I didn't know that either.
Oh, yeah. It's only in Western cultures that still don't have arranged marriages.
Really?
Because historically, biggest decision, your parents knew better.
And your parents aren't going to put you in a spot that they don't see you being happy and thriving. That is interesting.
And then I feel like you both fight for it too, because you're like, okay, well, we were both put in this position, so now we're just going to choose to love each other,
Yeah. And that's why in arranged marriage cultures, their divorce rate is way lower than ours.
Wow.
Because they go into a marriage, maybe not with infatuation.
Yeah.
Or high expectations.
Yeah. It's the sense of, we're going to make this work because it's more of a, hey, this is about our family. This is about finances. Yeah. This is about all of these things. It's not just about a feeling of, being madly in love.
Mm-hmm. So obviously, we're not going to all of a sudden change society and become a society of arranged marriages. So what are some of those principles that can carry forward to just normal dating and engagement processes?
Yeah. Dating and, doing dates in groups, hanging out in groups. I think the family is huge. I had a guy in my office not too long ago, and you could just tell this is wisdom on his part, and he's dating this person. And it was a sense of, I want your honest opinion on this person, and this person well. How do you feel like the two personalities, match well? And there was a couple concerns here and there. But just the fact that he was willing to come to his pastor and ask those questions, it's like he doesn't want to make a decision in the dark. He wants, and he had talked to his parents and other people as well, and get that, that 360 view of, hey, what's your honest opinion on this person?
So then when it comes to people who maybe don't have parents that they look up to, or not godly parents or friends or family, what do they do? Who do they go to?
Yeah, if you're in that position, and if you don't have anybody in your life that you can trust to go to and ask, that's a whole nother discussion about community and the importance of having those kind of people in your life. Right? For you guys, probably like your parents and probably each other. But, you know, you've got a lot of people from your years, whether at school or camp or work, where you probably have 50 people you could go to and ask. So if people are in that spot where they don't have anybody, right, they're in a problem, you know, uniquely. Yeah.
And all these things that we've been talking about with relationships, with being intentional with people, that carries to those community pieces too. It doesn't, not just romantic relationships, but those same principles by building out your sphere before you're dating someone, building out those relationships prior to getting romantically involved. You can set yourself up to have that backbone to support you.
Yeah. Someone once said that you'll never be content married until you learn to be content single. And I think there is a principle in that contentment wherever God places you at. And if you're single and if you're not dating, God wants you to be content, right? And that involves having relationships with friends and community that aren't necessarily romantic relationships. I've seen that over and over where it's like, I want this, I want to be married, I want it, you know, and then God says, no, you need to be content. And then once you're content, then God brings that person.
Yeah, Ben Stewart in his book, Single, Dating, Engaged, Married, I love how he talks about you want someone to complement you, not complete you. And true completion only comes through Jesus. But having that person that complements you, kind of going back to your original idea of it, making you a better person. And do you like the person you're becoming around them? And so I think that's a good point.
And I think there's people who like strive to be filled by someone else. And like you guys are both saying, being content in the Lord and not being content in, oh, I need someone else to affirm me of this. I need someone else to tell me I look good, or to text me every single day or call me up. And how would you say for a single person who's struggling with that, how can they become just content in not having to go to someone, not having that relationship?
Yeah. Well, relationships, you know, I see this like at our church. We have a large group of people that are, most of them single, some are married, but they're kind of like young, and they just have great community. Right? They do stuff together all of the time, and they're going places and doing stuff and serving together because God makes us for community and relationships. And so if we're not in that stage of life where God hasn't provided that one person, you know, in the terms of a romantic relationship, right, that doesn't mean that we don't need community.
Right.
And so I think people, regardless of their state, whether they're single, dating, they need to be involved in community.
Yeah.
You know, you talked about that idea of not to complete, but to complement. And I think that's true. I'm teaching a class on interpersonal relationships, and I'd always said, you know, opposites attract. You hear that phrase? That's actually not true. Most people are attracted and end up marrying people who are similar to them. Similar geographically, people they live around, people that have similar values, similar likes, and even similar personalities.
Wow, okay.
And so, but there's some implications for that.
Yeah.
So if you are attracted to someone who's just like you, oftentimes you don't complement each other, you compete against each other.
Yeah.
And that has kind of some interesting dynamics. If you look at people maybe you've been attracted to or dated before, are they similar to you or are they different?
I mean, there's definitely things that are different.
I was just talking to you about this on the ride back from the airport. And I was like, I feel like I always get in these deep conversations and like these friendships and relationships with people that like the same things.
That are wired the same.
That are wired the same way. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing though, too, because I feel like I'm not growing in a different direction. Like I feel like you make me grow in a direction that's because I think we're very different. And so I think she makes me more like her and I make her more like me. And that can be beneficial, but then also it can cause like conflict and, we don't really
operate the same way.
We don't operate the same way. It's hard to work with each other sometimes. So we have to learn that way. So I can see positives to both, but I have noticed that a lot of my relationships, I'm like, oh wait, why am I drawn to this person?
Yeah. So we like pre-marriage, we have a pretty thorough pre-marriage. And I just had a couple that were both extreme introverts that were in my office last week. So they're always going to agree that the best night ever on a Friday night is going to be stay home, pull the shades, and watch a movie.
Yeah.
Right? But because they're both introverts, right, there's nobody to pull them out of that.
Yeah.
And the tendency will be, they don't value community necessarily, right? Versus my wife is a strong introvert. I'm a high extrovert. And that has been an issue for 30 years. My idea of fun is very different than hers. So it's been a source of conflict, but it's also pulled her this way and it's pulled me this way. And I think we both have become balanced because of it.
That's an interesting point. Just the idea that not every relationship is the same. Sometimes you have two introverts. Sometimes you have two extroverts. Sometimes you have a mix. And I think it's easy in today's day and age, especially with social media, to look at other relationships and compare to other relationships and think, oh, I need to find someone. I'm like this person, so I probably have to find someone who's like
me, or
kind of
whatever.
like who that person's married to, because that's how I'm wired. But that's not the case. Every person is so uniquely different, and every situation you have to approach differently. But if you've got at the center, you can figure out and come to a way that you can work together in a relationship.
I remind people all of the time that you as an individual, there has never, ever been in the history of humanity, billions and billions of people, anybody like you that has the same genetics, that has the same experience, that at the same time, there is nobody like you. And then you're marrying somebody that is equally unique. And then you put those two people in a relationship. There has never been in the history of the world a relationship that is just like the one that you're in. And so in some ways, you can't put it in a box.
Yeah.
Because your life experiences and where you grew up and your family of origin and the timing, COVID and, millennials, all this stuff. I mean, it's
all different.
It's so unique.
Yeah.
And so part of, relationships and marriage and dating is such a spirit-led, right? You're on a journey that nobody else has ever been on.
Yeah.
And you're trying to...
That makes it sound exciting.
It is. And you're trying to create something that has never been created before.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, there's principles to go by, but it's like a path that's never been gone down before.
Yeah. Could you just tell us more about your marriage counseling? Because you do a lot with premarital counseling and you go really in depth with the people you work with. And I know that there's a test that you do with them. Could you kind of tell us more about that? Because I think that's really intriguing.
Yeah, so that's part of our church. And, we have about a dozen weddings every year. And part of the requirement, we put them through the whole process. We have a big book that we've created that, everything from boundaries to budgets to interviews to all kinds of different stuff. But one of the core things is we use a thing called Prepare and Enrich. It's an assessment that looks at family of origin issues. It looks at communication, conflict, financial, anything you could think of. Because a lot of people, and they're maybe in their 20s and they're thinking about getting married. I encourage people to take it before they get engaged. Because if it's really bad, then it's too late after you announced it to the whole Facebook world But so often young people are just not self-aware of how they tick. They just don't know themselves. I'll ask people, are you an extrovert or an introvert? Well, what? Right? Are you a pleaser? Are you a avoider? I said, the person you're marrying, are they a pleaser, avoider? Or they don't have the categories for it. And it's like, then they realized, that's why we never argue, because he just gets mad and I just cave in. I don't want to fight or an argument. And so I'll just those are terrible patterns going into a marriage. And so try to help people understand who they are.
Yeah.
How do they tick? Why do I get so frustrated? Because I'm a pleaser, avoider. And now I say yes, 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 yes. Everybody loves me. But then I'm so overwhelmed because I say yes to everything. And I get so tired of trying to make everybody happy. And they don't understand it. They don't understand those dynamics. And then they marry somebody who's just the opposite and can take advantage of that. And so, we pour a lot of time. And all the statistics say people who go through pretty thorough pre-marriage counseling can half the divorce rate.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
So I think it's worth the investment.
Yeah. Could you kind of elaborate the difference between pleaser and avoider for those that don't know exactly what that might be?
Yeah. The pleaser is somebody who walks on eggshells when they think there's other people that are upset with something. And it really bothers you when other people aren't happy, right? And people love pleasers because they're fun to be around. They don't cause issues or problems. They're just agreeable, right? And so they're always well liked, but they oftentimes can get ran over. The avoider is somebody kind of like that, but they go out of their way to avoid a conflict. And in some ways, they will always take the blame. They'll always say, oh, it's not a big deal. Somebody will say something super, super hurtful to you. And it's like, oh, you just put it under the rug. That didn't feel bad. You just almost a denial because you so don't want to have to deal with a conflict.
Yeah.
And so those are completely toxic in like a committed marriage relationship.
Yeah.
They just don't work.
No, they don't.
And you speak with lots of couples regularly. And I know as Christians, we know these like different traits that we should be looking for when we're going into dating someone or engaged or married. And we have these ideas in our mind, okay, like they need to be a Christian, they need to love their family, love others. But what would you say are like specific things that we should prioritize as Christians that aren't kind of like the basic?
Well, yeah, I guess every individual is different, but I just think the ability to clearly communicate, right? Good communication. We communicate at 5 different levels, right? The ability to say clearly what that person feels and thinks, right? It's huge. If you can't do that, then conflict resolution is never going to happen. There are just some people that have never been taught or have never, maybe a family of origin, have just never learned how to communicate. And that can be tough in a relationship, to have a relationship with somebody who refuses or is unable to communicate.
Yeah. I'm reading a book right now for my master's program, and they're talking about the importance of when you're delivering a speech, looking at how what you know can sometimes be a hindrance because you assume that everyone else knows what you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for relationships. You get into an argument and you think, oh, they know exactly what I'm thinking. And you think that you're saying that, but they don't know what's going on in your brain. They only know what you've said.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that happens all the time in just normal conversations.
For sure. And I think we assume things, oftentimes there'll be assumption that you can read my mind. Exactly. Right. And that's terrible communication because we can't. But the good thing about communication when like couples score really low on that is it's a skill that can be taught. Just like financial management, just like conflict resolution. You can take classes, you can read books, you can learn to communicate better. There are things though that you can't learn. So like one of the scales is called partner style and habits. When you score low on that one, then you're in trouble. Because those are the things that you can't. So maybe you're like dating a person and they're super, super like an introvert, maybe passive, not assertive. And that's just who they are. I mean, that's their personality. Your personality is set by about age 5. And after that, it's like jacking up concrete.
Yes.
But secretly, you really wish they were more of an extrovert, maybe more of a leader, more take the initiative. And you think, wow, when we get married, I can. Well, you can't.
Yeah.
That's just who they are. And so at some point, you just have to say, that's who they are. That's their core personality. I'm not going to be able to change it. Can I live with that?
Yeah. I've always heard like when you're dating, it's one thing, but then when you're married, like those things are just magnified. Like the good is magnified, but also the bad is magnified. So I think that's kind of a cool thought.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Yeah.
For couples who don't live together before they get married, right? It's a big adjustment. When you're dating, you always have your best foot forward, pretty much up to the day of the wedding, especially if you're a pleaser avoider, because you don't want a conflict and you're dating, you're putting your best foot forward. You want that person to like you, right? You don't want them to see that side of you. Then when you're living together and sharing an address and sharing a bed and a bathroom and they see the whole side of you, they see on your good days and your bad days, you don't get to go home at night and hide how you're really feeling, right? It's intense. Yeah. And marriage is the most intimate of relationships and it brings out the best and they get to see the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you hope that every relationship ends in marriage because you really do want what's best for people, but oftentimes that's not the case. And oftentimes you end up getting your heart broken or your heart hurt. And I would love to know your perspective on when people are kind of in that stage where, oh my goodness, I'm with this person and this isn't right. I'm not supposed to be dating them. What is your advice for going through a breakup season? Because I feel like we don't talk about that a lot, and it's so hard because even if you're wanting to end a relationship because you know it's the right thing, oftentimes you still care about the person, and how to do that with honor.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference between yellow flags and red flags. NASCAR, yellow flags mean you just slow down. Red flags are like, it's over.
Yeah.
And being able to distinguish, and in wisdom, and I think spiritually led, and good people around you to distinguish what's a yellow flag versus what's a game breaker, like a red flag, right? If someone is a chronic liar, maybe they're not faithful, right? Those are red flags.
Yeah.
Those are behaviors that don't generally just stop because you have a marriage license. Yellow flags maybe are like, they're maybe not as dependable, or maybe they came from a tough family background or something. And you have to weigh those, whether you slow down, yellow. But if you're a pleaser avoider, sometimes that can be hard to do because you don't want to hurt their feelings and you don't want the conflict of when you have to say hard things to somebody. But you have to be able to do it in a kind but firm way. And a part of that is just all the dynamics of the relationship too.
Exactly.
Back to the issue of just knowing yourself, being self-aware. I think that's so important. I heard a quote the other day. It says, you can't escape from a prison you don't know you're in. And I thought about that a lot. What are the prisons that we're in that we can't even escape because we don't know we're in them?
Yeah.
Mindsets that we get in, lies that we've believed, either about ourselves or a worldview. And we can live in these prisons and we never get out of them because we don't know we're in them.
Yeah.
There's something I like to use in all my classes, no matter what class it is. It's called the Jahardi window. And it's got those squares, there's 4 quadrants.
Yes. Yeah.
And the one is the open, it about yourself. Everybody else knows it about you. But then you have that window, kind of that they call the blind spot, right? Everybody knows it about you, but you don't know it about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the most dangerous one. Like if you've ever hung around somebody who just is obnoxiously talking all of the time and they don't know it, right? And they lose friends and they've dated a few times and then they get dumped. And they have no idea why they can't keep friendships. They don't understand why they lost jobs. Everybody else knows it, but they don't know it themselves. And so part of self-awareness is like, well, how do I learn what those windows are?
And I feel like that's where community comes in too.
Yeah, it goes back to our
honest
original
people who are surrounding you that are pouring truth into you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a friend in your life that loves you enough to say, you got diarrhea of the mouth? You need to ask 5 questions for every time you give your opinion and let other people talk. Ask them questions.
Yeah.
Be interested in their life. They're like, really? I didn't know that. But, do you have somebody in your life that's like that?
You were kind of talking about yellow flags. I want to go back to that. You were saying like, oh, their family is this way and that way. And I do want to touch on the family aspect because I hear a lot of people say like, oh, you marry into the family, which I feel like is true. But how do you discern the difference between, okay, this is a family that's different than me and it's okay versus, oh, this is a family that like, this wouldn't work?
Yeah. Family of origin is a big deal. It just is, because typically the only thing that you know about marriage is the
Watching
one that
your
you grew up.
Yeah.
Right. Your definition of what a dad should be is the one that you saw. Your understanding of what communication in a marriage looks like, and you went to friends' houses and you watched TV, but 99% of it is the one that you witnessed. And if it's very dysfunctional, that is your default for what's normal. And so when we talk about family of origin, just because you grew up in a super, super dysfunctional family doesn't mean that you have to repeat it, but that is our default setting.
If that's all you know, that's what you'll replicate.
Yeah. And so part of like, if you're in a relationship with somebody who comes from like a really dysfunctional family, and I'm just not talking about a different worldview or you just do things different. I'm talking about addictions and just really terrible communication, conflict resolution skills, is how do you decipher what their default setting is?
Yeah.
And again, that takes wisdom, because once you fall in love, it's the word eros, right? That's where we get that's the Greek word for passion, right? That's the word when Cupid shoots you with the arrow and you get the blinders and you just get so stupid you can't see reality, right? And that's what happens. You see people that are so infatuated, they're so eros that they can't see maybe some of the dysfunction in this person because they so badly want that person to be, Mr. or Mrs. Right. So part of it is not allowing yourself to get zapped by that arrow too quickly, where you don't give somebody your full being right away and you keep your wits about you, but it's also having community where people can
pour into you and say, hey, this is what I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And we've talked a lot about dating, and I know a lot of our audience is kind of in that same age as us where they're in that dating stage and engagement stage. But there are a lot of people in our audience that are married and have families. And before we wrap up, I'd love to touch just briefly on, in marriage, how do you kind of keep that relationship going? How do you make sure to keep investing in each other when you have kids and you're running to basketball games and football games and trying to just manage a schedule, because that's a lot.
Yeah, it's tough. It is tough. I think you always have to find something that you do enjoy doing together. Mm-hmm. For my wife and I had never walked in my life. I mean, I used to run, but to walk, like, why would you do that? I mean, you could just get on your bike or you could get in a car.
Exactly.
But that's like yesterday, we walked 4 miles around the trail. No cell phones, no kids. That's just become a priority. And, you get an hour of uninterrupted, just, hey, how was your day? Tell me all your stories. I'll tell you mine. What's happening this weekend? What do we need? You have to make it a priority to have some kind of connecting point where you can have that uninterrupted time of communication. It's interesting because the divorce rate, it spikes at like year 5, 6, 7. Mm-hmm. It's about when people typically have kids. And then it goes down and it goes flat until the empty nest, and then goes straight up.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. So a lot of couples, they have kids and their life isn't revolved around their marriage. It's revolved around their children and their activities. Oh. And once those are out of the house,
and they don't know what to do.
They look at each other and like, who are you? Right? For the last 20 years, our whole life has been about games and activities and band concerts. And they just realize they don't like each other and, go their separate ways. So you always got to be working towards the empty nest and always having that connection.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you change a lot during that time too, because when you're put in different circumstances, like all of a sudden now you're mom, dad, you have to embrace new roles. Yeah. And that can lead to a lot of change. So then by the time the kids are gone, it's like, whoa, you really are a different person.
Well, you are. I met my wife when I was 22.
Yeah.
Now I'm 52. So it was 30 years ago, and you have 3 decades of jobs and experiences and kids and, ups and downs and challenges. And so, I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago, and neither is she, neither is Rachel. But I think we're both better people. But part of that is the relationship that she's made me better. Mm-hmm. I've tried to make her better. And I think that's what marriage is supposed to do. Mm-hmm. She can say things to me that nobody else can say.
Yeah.
And I know that she loves me more than anybody else. And she wouldn't say anything mean-spirited just to get at me. Mm-hmm. She knows that because we're one flesh and our whole lives are wrapped together, she's only saying hard things because she knows it's best. Mm-hmm. For us, our family, our marriage, and vice versa. And that's why, the marriage relationship is meant to be permanent, because only in the permanency of the marriage, it's the only relationship other than maybe a parent and child where you can say, I can say anything in this relationship, and I know this person isn't going to leave me. They're committed. We can say hard things in a committed relationship.
Before we get to the last question of the podcast, I want to ask a specific question for you regarding relationships. What is the best relationship advice that you've ever been given?
Best relationship advice I've ever been given. So for a married couple or for a dating couple?
We could do, can we do all, like, in general?
In general.
In general, everything.
In general. Maybe I should flip and ask you, what's the best advice you've been given?
Great.
I guess kind of focusing on the single to dating stage. I think the best advice comes from Ben Stewart's book that I was mentioning, Single, Dating, Engaged, Married. And he talked about the importance of how we're on this race. And as a runner, I really connected to it, of how ultimately our job is to just keep running to Jesus. And that's our job. We're going to keep running to Jesus. But eventually, as a long distance runner, it gets really hard to run by yourself sometimes. And one day you have this person run right next to you and you'll just run together and you'll help push each other together towards the finish line, towards Jesus. But until that day, you just keep running to Jesus. And you might have people run alongside you for a little bit, and then you realize they're running a different direction and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep running to Jesus. And it's not about finding that person. You can get distracted running all different directions, but ultimately you have to run to Jesus, and you wait until that person can run with you. You can run together and you can push each other and you'll run together towards Jesus.
Yeah, that's great advice. When I think about relationships, a lot of times people will say, I just don't have any friends. I don't have any friends. And so part of it is just taking the initiative. God's created us for community.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe you are more of an introvert, but you have to give it a try, and you have to call people up, and you have to be involved in places where you can be. So taking the initiative, and also realizing it's not about finding the right person. It's about being the right person.
Yeah.
If you concentrate on becoming the person that Christ intends you to be, right? Character, integrity, righteous, all these things, right? God will do the business of finding the person.
Exactly.
Right? So I think sometimes we think of it as like this big search. That person is out there. I just got to go find them. But it's not about finding the right person. It's about becoming the right person, and then God will bring that person to us.
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Something that my friend and I were talking about the other day is the verse Isaiah 26:3, which is, He will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you. And I feel like that can relate so much to relationships, where if your mind is on Christ, and he will give you that peace. He's not going to make something confusing or chaotic. And if your mind is set on Him, He will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you, because He cares for you, because He trusts in you. And so I feel like just constantly going to Christ for everything. What do you want me to know? What do you want me to do? Keep bringing it to Him, and He speaks through peace, and He speaks through clarity and not through confusion.
Exactly. I think that's just becoming the person that He wants you to be. And in that character development, it's like, if you've ever lost your keys, right? And you're searching, you can't find them. It's like sometimes when you quit looking is when you find them.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes God wants us to be content. Be content wherever He has you. Someone once said, if you put yourself in a football field right at the 50-yard line and draw a big circle around it, everything that you have, you put in the circle. Contentment is that I don't need anything else outside of that circle to be content. That He's already given me everything that I need right now to be content. Maybe that's single, maybe that's in a relationship. And that's always helped me to think through this idea of contentment.
Yeah.
I don't need anything outside of that circle to be content.
I have everything I need.
Yeah.
God will supply every need.
Yeah, it's already there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that advice. And now the actual question of the podcast, which is, what is one truth you would encourage all listeners to be rooted in?
One truth. God has created you in His image and likeness. You are a reflection, an image bearer of God Himself. And that gives you infinite value and worth and purpose in this life. Our identity is not based upon how pretty we are, how smart we are, how many races we won, or achievements or trophies we've won. Our identity is based upon God chose to create us uniquely, perfectly in His image. And that's what gives us purpose, meaning, and value.
Yeah.
And nobody can take that away from us.
So true.
Good times, bad times, success, failures. That's what we have to be rooted in.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Bryan. We appreciate you and even coming in a third time to record this.
Yeah.
I'm so glad this could finally work out. So thank you just so much for your wisdom and your insight and just even pouring into us too as we've grown up out of camp. So thank you.
Oh, it's
you're
been
the
fun to
best.
watch you guys grow up and become like adults and college and real jobs. And can I be the first to announce it?
Go for
Yeah.
it.
Josie has just accepted the job to be the press secretary for the new governor of the great state, the promised land of South Dakota.
Yeah.
Go Jackrabbits!
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great state. Governor Roden is the best. So
That'd be awesome.
really overjoyed to be able to help him make South Dakota strong, safe, and free.
It is the promised land.
Glad you could be the first to announce it.
Yes.
Wow, this is a big deal.
That's great.
Well, thanks again,
Yeah.
Bryan.
Yeah, my privilege.
Thank you so much, Bryan.